All right, I'm here today with Chad Dedmon from Bethel Church in Reading. He's a revivalist, evangelist. What else, Chad? What could I say about you?
Yeah, a friend of God.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, I just love friendship. I love just connecting with Jesus and then bringing Jesus, to the world and people encountering the authentic Jesus. And so, yeah, I mean, you could put evangelist in there, you can put pastor in there, you put revivalist in there, or physician's assistant. There's times when I've been on an airplane and they ask like, "Whoa, what were you doing in Phoenix, Arizona?" And I'm like, "Well, I'm a physician's assistant and I work for the greatest physician you've ever heard of." I mean, this physician, we've seen cancer healed. I've seen people that have no eyeballs get brand new eyeballs. I'm like, wait, what? Like, my cousin's in need of this physician.
Yeah.
How do I get this physician's contact? I'm like, well, his name is Jesus Christ. And they're like, wait, what? No, and I'm just like, perfect. So
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's a wide gambit.
Man, that is awesome. I want to ask you about evangelism. It's something that we've started stepping into in our church, and we just feel fire in this season on reaching people for Jesus. And so we've just had some powerful experiences with it recently. And I know it's something that's a passion of your heart. So what could you share with us about evangelism?
Yeah. First I was raised by two evangelists, my parents. And so it just kind of is in my blood, in my bones, where we had a church called Church 24/7. We'd have people live at our house. I was 10 years old and they would put me in like these big dumpsters to minister to like winos and drug addicts. And we'd go to Compton and Watts and Southern California and just see people get transformed by the power of Jesus. And it was so beautiful, and it just wrecks your heart when you see someone encounter Jesus. And we are living in such an amazing time. I mean, one of the fruits of the Jesus People movement in the late 60s, early 70s was evangelism and salvation. And in 2015, God spoke to me and said that there's another Jesus People movement coming. And I want you to learn more language of heaven and how to articulate the gospel to a generation that's never heard the gospel in their language. And the first place I want you to go to intercede and connect with this generation is go to Coachella. Go to Lollapalooza. That I started going to music festivals and just sharing Jesus with people.
Wow.
And I think that is so important for us to go to the highways and byways, to go to the places of culture and bring Jesus to them. And I started a ministry called Catch the Wave in 2018. And we do these Catch the Wave outreaches where we do a wow service. One of the big things that God's been talking to me about with evangelism is how do you become the light of the world, a city on a hill that cannot be hidden, where you're not chasing people down, but they're actually chasing you down. And so one thing that I'll do is a wow service, which is worship on water. And so we'll go, maybe 20 of us, 30 of us, and we take our surfboards and we go paddle out past the waves, and we bring out, guitars and like djembes, and we just worship Jesus. And people paddle over to us, people on the beach go, "Is this a spiritual thing? Can we join you?" And we'll have people get saved while they're asking us what we're doing. And one time we were worshiping, and 5 people paddled up to us and they said, "What is this?" And we're like, "Oh, we're worshiping Jesus. Do you want to join us?" And they're like, "Well, who's Jesus?" And we told them about Jesus, and then they got saved and they joined our worship, time. So I think it's learning, how to be a city on a hill that cannot be hidden.
That's awesome. What would you say to because there's so many churches that are maybe just getting going, or even established churches, but what could you say to start people in the right direction to, because I think evangelism, when you say that word, so many people in church get scared, like, oh, I have to share my faith, that's scary. And so what advice would you give to pastors, how do we lead our church into revival or into evangelism?
Yeah, I think it starts with having a heart for your city and knowing how to articulate Jesus to your city. And so, Jesus says in Luke 9, he was with the people and he realized they were sheep without a shepherd, and he had compassion on them, and then he healed them. And so I think as churches and as pastors, if we could lead our community to begin to grow in what I would call horizontal intercession, to allow the people that live in your city to cut you deep. And, I think so out of that place of compassion then brings authority, because you're connected to your city, but also you're connected to heaven. You're connected to the Father. So, helping your people be connected to the Father, but also how to be connected to your city. That Jesus went up on the hill over Jerusalem and wept. So when have we gone to a town square, a place where there's a lot of people walking around, where we've just watched people and we started weeping out of a place of compassion? And so, I think those are some of the places that it starts, where it's motivated with compassion. It's motivated, my heart is for the lost, that I want them to know this Jesus. And I think definitely strength in numbers. If, telling our pastors that, hey, there's something about going out in teams of 2 and 3. I mean, Jesus did that. He commissioned his disciples to do that. That there's something that happens. I remember in the early days of me being at Bethel in 2002, it was like me, Chris Overstreet, Joaquin Evans, a few others, where we would just hang out at Denny's. We would just hang out and we would cheer one another on, where it's not a competition, but also I've sometimes have led outreach times where they're looking to me as I'm the leader. When you can have a friendship circle where we like to go and eat good food. And so we're eating there, and then there's people around, and we just, okay, hey, everyone's going to take a step of risk, and we're going to give our server a prophetic word. And I think where you have a place where you're safe, where you feel like you're cheered on, that success, I think we have to redefine success. That sometimes we think, oh, I'm unsuccessful because I presented the gospel to a stranger and they said I don't want anything to do with it. Oh, I just failed. I did, that was an unsuccessful moment of evangelism, when really that we have to redefine what success is. That I remember being in the prayer chapel at Bethel praying, and I heard God say, I want you to study how Israel farms. And this is in Isaiah, in the beginning of Isaiah, where it talks about the seed bearers of righteousness throw out the seeds of righteousness, and the plowman is sure to follow. And I remember going to Israel and watching how they farm, and so they have these guys throwing out seeds, and the plowman watches where the seed goes down, and then they follow them. And the plowman is the King of Glory, the Father. That our responsibility is to throw out seeds. Wow. And I remember growing up in high school, doing Evangelism Explosion. Also, we would sometimes glorify being rejected. Like that guy slammed the door in my face. Oh yeah, well that guy like ran me down in his car. Like that guy wanted nothing to do with Jesus. Or it'd be the other thing of, I was terrified at times of, oh no, what if I presented the gospel the wrong way, and I got them further away from God? Like I pushed them even further towards hell. That there was that fear that would paralyze me, that would bring condemnation, that would keep me from sharing my faith. And I think to begin to understand that we're called to throw out seeds of the kingdom, that is our responsibility. And we're connected to way more fruit than we realize, that we can't judge the fruit by what that person's experience, what the reaction was right then and there. That you might be seeing someone at a grocery store, maybe it's a grocery, a cashier, and you say, hey, you know what? Your smile like brightens people's day, and you're just moving in like the joy of the Lord, where you're just exuding joy, and they're like, oh, you seem happy. You seem like my uncle. My uncle's a Christian. Are you a Christian? Yeah, I love Jesus. And they're like, I want nothing to do with that. And you think, oh, that was not a good experience. They were not receptive to Jesus, but you have no idea what's going to happen after you leave. It might be weeks later, it might be months later, that they hit a rock bottom, or they hit a moment where they call their uncles. I met one of your friends the other day at the grocery store. Like, I want to know this joy. I want to know, and you're connected in the fruit of that person getting saved, even though you didn't, lead them to the Lord. You're connected to that fruit. And so I think we as Christians, as we do evangelism, we have way more fruit than we realize. But our only responsibility is to throw out seeds of the kingdom.
That's so good. Yeah, I love that. So we throw out the seeds, and God comes behind us with the plow, and He's responsible for seeing those seeds come to fruition.
Yeah, I mean, what I just shared in the intro of being a physician's assistant. There might be times like I'll be on an airplane tomorrow, and well, what brought you to Phoenix? And I tell them I'm a physician's assistant, and and they're like, well, what's the name? And I'm like, well, it's Jesus. And they're like, oh gosh, someone switch seats with me. So, but I could right then and there just put the chair and recline and say it's too late. The seed has been planted. The plowman is sure to follow, even though they might be totally upset or whatever. But my heart is not to offend. My heart is to bring seeds of the kingdom, seeds of righteousness, and that it puts a bullseye in them in the spirit realm, that the plowman will be sure to follow.
Oh, I love that. It's just co-laboring with the Father. So good. So this is something it's kind of coming up in our church. simultaneously with this new fire of evangelism is, and I keep telling our church, I'm like, get ready for babies, because we're out there, we're seeing people saved now. And I see a lot of spiritual moms and dads in our church, and I'm like, get ready for babies, people that are coming that are brand new. And so discipleship has been something that's been on my heart really heavy. And I've just been in my own process with the Lord of like, God, how do I do this? Like, how do I, like my heart and what I'm really going after is taking men and teaching them how to lead themselves well, so that they can lead their existing family and children well, or the family that they're gonna have. And so what does that look like with churches, with new believers coming in, but also with people that have been in church for 20 years that have maybe never been discipled? They've sat in a seat in church, but no one's ever grabbed onto them and discipled them. What can you share with us about discipleship?
Yeah, I mean, discipleship and fathering and mothering, the heart of that when you're pouring into a son and daughter is that your goal is that they go beyond you, that you give them an inheritance, and success is them going beyond where you're at, and then you get to be connected to that fruit. And, I love being a pastor. I remember being a junior high pastor, and one of my junior high kids at a beach baptism walked on water. Wow. Which is something that I've never walked in before. I've never stepped into that, like before. And so, there wasn't, see, the thing about a father or mother with discipleship is, when you're secure as a father or mother, you can't be replaced. Your job status is not in question. Yeah. That if we operate as pastors and when we begin to anoint the next generation and they begin to come up with their gifting and their voice, we can be insecure in our identity and say, oh, no. And that's when control happens. That's when these guys are getting too good. My job might be in question. But if you're a father or mother, when they start going beyond you, you're going to begin to celebrate them. So I think setting up opportunities for them to step into their destiny. And I think that's key. I think definitely discipleship is just, I think food is one of the biggest things. As you see in Jesus' life and as you see in the Bible, that there's so many moments where people's lives get changed through the exchange of food. And it's interesting how God made us, that we're designed to eat a couple times a day and to break bread together. And it's what the apostles did in the first days of the church, that we would break bread together. And it's in that time where we share our stories, we share our lives. And so I think it's definitely, I think that we are on a journey as a church of what does community look like. And I think there's many touch points. But I think food is a huge, place, but also the heart of a father and mother is to raise up sons and daughters that go beyond them. And so it's trying to figure out the different ways that can happen. But I think the other thing is accessibility. That to have, honor is a two-way street, that sons and daughters feel honored and that fathers and mothers feel honored and that they're called to run together. And so I think it's so important to learn to run together, but also to be accessible, to have moments of conversations. There's something beautiful about time. You can't speed up time. And so I have such a value for those relationships, those fathers and mothers that have been speaking in my life for 20 plus years. Wow. That I can't fast forward that. I can't manufacture that. So I think one big thing that I would encourage people in discipleship, whether you're a son or a father, is to enjoy the journey, to allow moments where equity can build, where, but to understand too, that you can't manipulate, you can't manufacture, you can't go 0 to 60, to enjoy the process and to celebrate time.
Yeah, that's awesome. Okay, so I have one more question for you, and this is one I like to ask just everybody I respect in the spiritual leaders. What does it's around prayer, so what does your personal prayer life look like? What are your prayer times like? And what could you share with us about prayer in general?
Yeah, prayer is a big one. I mean, prayer is a conversation. Being an intercessor is to be a friend of God and to be in that constant conversation. I remember in Norway, I was doing a conference in 2006, and someone asked me that question of like, what are the different seasons of prayer? Do you fast certain, times of the year? And I was about ready to give them a little bit of my journey. And the Lord says, tell them that you pray 24/7. And I'm like, God, like, you know my life. I do not pray 24/7. He goes, no, Chad, your spirit is in communion with my spirit 24/7.
Wow.
And it's the journey of recognizing how my spirit is engaged with the Spirit of God. And so it's that place of recognizing, becoming aware of his presence, whether it be in a place of intentionality of being in the four walls of the church, or being on my bike, or being on a walk, that I begin to connect with God in the different parts of my day, begin to recognize his presence. But when I think authenticity is huge, that I've been in this place of doing these paddles, stand-up paddleboarding in the ocean, and I do these prayer journeys where I paddle down the coastline from one section to another, and where I'm praying for the state, praying for our country. And I feel like the Lord is raising up intercessors, especially in this time, to begin to discover their prayer mat. That God has given us many prayer mats, and one of those for me is in the water, surfing. And when we begin to be secure in our authenticity, where we begin to find God in these places of prayer that I'd call thin places, you begin to find your authority. You begin to find your voice. And so, but it isn't, I'm not limited just to one prayer mat. That I love going into float tanks. Float tanks are amazing. And I'm not going to explain float tanks right now, but it's a place where I can easily connect with God. And I think it's finding your sweet spots, and that's the journey that you get to have with God, is finding the different places where it is your prayer mat.
Oh, that's awesome. So it could be like things that you enjoy doing just in life, like your hobbies and stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, it says in Proverbs 13:12 that hope deferred makes the heart sick, but desire realized is the tree of life. So God, I'm made in his image, but there isn't another Chad Michael Dedmon. My DNA is different from anyone else's. So to begin to go on that journey, where I discovered at 5 years old, I discovered God in the water, in the ocean, growing up in Orange County. And so that is a huge thin place. And so I've had to take a journey, and it's been interesting how sometimes the religious spirit will try to, shame me, condemn me for being authentic in my journey of discovering God. That I remember, going to a church when I was 18, and they said, if you have hobbies or passions that's not God, like, you need to throw it on the altar. So I had a surfboard, so I threw it on the altar, and I was living in Florida at the time. And about 2 months later, there's a hurricane swell, and this hurricane swell came, and God's like, what did you do? Why did you give up your surfboard? I never told you to do that. I love to go surfing with you, go borrow a surfboard. And then later on, a couple years later, I was a missionary in Indonesia, and I went for 4 months, and I only surfed on the island of Bali, and we're debriefing on the airplane, me and God, and God's like, what would you have done differently? And I was like, I really wish I would have surfed more. And God's response is, I really wish you would have surfed more too, because I find pleasure in you when you surf. And to break it down, to just, button up this point, is I remember leading a missions trip once, and I would go surfing in the mornings, and we would have night meetings, and we'd have, lunch meetings and during the day meetings, and I had a whole team, but I would go surf in the morning, and, there was a pastor that was like, I think you surf too much in the mornings. And I'm like, and I had to really pray and kind of take that feedback of okay, yeah, where can I adjust, or is there a place of adjustment? But God really spoke to me and said, no, Chad, if you were in your room with worship music and your Bible open, you'd be celebrated for your spirituality. But if you're being authentic in how I connect with you, it's in the water. That is your secret place. That is you, where I connect with you. And so it's just being, true to yourself and how God has made you.
Wow, that is so good. Thank you so much, Chad. I know we're about ready to have an awesome service with you. And
here we go.
Thanks for taking some time to just sit down and chat with us and give us some wisdom. Appreciate that.
Yeah.
All right.
Here
Bless
we go.
you. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in today.